I kept my wedding band on because taking it off felt like washing her name from my hands. Seoul never goes quiet. Not really. Even 7 floors up, in our 1-bedroom off the main road in Mapo-gu, the city crawls under the windows with the white noise of buses sighing, scooters needling between lanes, the occasional drunk song tumbling out of a pojangmatcha. When we first moved in, Yunji called it a lullaby. It keeps the bad spirits busy, she joked, her smile sideways and soft. She had a way of smoothing the air around her closing cabinets without noise, slipping past chairs without bumping them, lowering even the kettle's whistle with a palm pressed lightly over the spout, like you would hush a child. There are 100 tiny ways to remember a person, and they all arrive at once when they are gone. The chipped mug with the fading cherry blossoms that she always held with 2 hands because it felt more respectful to the heat, the grocery list and Hangul magnets on the fridge, her rounded handwriting looping around words like apples, tofu, barley tea, the rosemary pear shampoo that turned the bathroom into a small orchard after every shower. My favorite. The note stuck to the rice cooker. Do not open early. Patience makes the grain kind. A sentence so perfectly her that I started reading it aloud when I cooked alone. Like a charm. I did not watch her die. People assume that I must have. They picture a hospital corridor, a light stuttering overhead, a doctor who has practiced saying the words in a way that breaks you but leaves them intact. But that night I was between stations, the gray mouth of the subway tunneling around me, my phone in my pocket, where her last text hummed against my leg without me feeling it. I came above ground at Hapjeong, and it was raining the way Seoul rains in late September, with a stubborn, infinite patience. I was 2 streets away when a taxi tried to stop, where slick paint refused to listen, when 2 sounds made a third break and horn married into metal and people ran without umbrellas, their heads down like rice, bent heavy under wind. I remember the red of the ambulance as if that were a smell. Remember the emergency room as a language I almost spoke. I remember that the clock on the wall read 10:52 p.m. on Thursday, September 12th, 2024, when a nurse took my wrist in both of her hands and guided me to a chair before the doctor said my wife's name. People will tell you that shock feels like nothing, but that is not true. It feels like everything you have ever owned floating to the ceiling while you are nailed to the floor. Her parents arrived fast and stayed slow. Her mother's hair held a rain-made shine even under fluorescent lights. Her father's voice never rose, but each syllable had sharp edges, as if he had cut them from glass to keep from bleeding. They touched my shoulder as if it were a ledge. We stood around the bed that had become a table, and the table that had become a gate. And I thought about the way she tucked her feet under my calf when she was cold, the way she laughed, without sound first, and then with all of it, the way she said my name like she was placing something fragile down where it belonged. We held the funeral the Korean way because there was no other way to hold it. A 3-day vigil at the funeral hall, chrysanthemums arrayed like a moonlit garden, the black ribbon crossing her photograph at a sober angle. The room was cool. The incense did. What incense does, it braided the air into something that could be tied to memory. People came with their bows and their envelopes and their carefully folded grief. An aunt whispered to me that love is a kind of paper, thin, translucent, strong enough to wrap a gift, weak enough to burn in one breath. A monk chanted syllables that felt older than my name. The women arranged fruit in careful ranks, persimmons like the damp heat of August, pears with their pale, dignified faces. On the second night, I slept in a chair and woke when the Jeza table rattled with the small earthquake that lives always inside a body newly emptied. We buried her because I asked to bury her in Seoul. Cremation is a door most people take, but I wanted ground and weight and a place for rain to mean something. Her father argued gently, saying the drive would be long, that the columbarium was clean and close, that this was how it was done now. I said her grandmother had been born before all of that she wore white on the day she married, and white again on the day she was mourned, that she kept a low wooden chest with folded paper charms under the bed, and did not sleep with the window open because, she said, the night has a habit of borrowing what you cannot spare. He looked at me for a long moment and then nodded. We chose a hill in Paju where the pines lean as if listening. The ground there keeps secrets, like an old friend. The morning of the burial was bright in the strange way grief makes brightness. The sky too clean, the sun too precise in its measuring of shadows. We carried the casket on our shoulders while a wind walked beside us. I put one shovelful of dirt on the lid, and then another, until the act had the rhythm of breathing, until I understood how the body fools itself into continuing anything that repeats. Her mother did not cry loudly. She made a sound like fabric being folded and unfolded, and I will hear that sound when I am an old man and no longer remember why I have stood up or where I was going when I did. After, people tried to feed us. Grief is always asked to eat. We sat around low tables and lifted spoons to lips that were not making words. Someone laughed once, some out-of-place story about a neighbor's dog, and the laugh hung in the air like a paper lantern no one had the courage to blow out. When we said goodbye, her father pressed an envelope into my hand. Inside was nothing but a small key taped to a slip of paper with her grandmother's name on it, and an address I recognized, even though I had never been there. Later, he said, when you can bear it. I went home to our apartment in the blue hour when Seoul is all glass and river. I took my shoes off and lined them up with hers, which still smelled faintly of the earth from the cemetery. Though that could have been my mind trying to make a bridge, it could cross. That night, I washed the last of her shirts and hung them on the drying rack. The clothespins, like little beaks holding on. I trimmed the stems of the white flowers people had left and put them in the tallest vase so their faces could see the room. I wiped the bathroom mirror because water had dried there in freckles she would have scolded me for. I folded the blanket at the foot of the bed the way she liked, into a neat rectangle that told her she was welcome in any weather. Her side of the bed looked staged, like the set of a play after the audience has left, and the actors are already halfway out of their costumes. I took the pillow and held it to my face, and I will tell you the truth. For a second, the faintest outline of her scent found me, not the shampoo, which would vanish as the days did, but the undernote of her skin, which was always clean, and somehow a little like rain. It felt like finding a photograph of yourself in someone else's album. I lay down and placed my hand on the empty mattress, the impression of my fingers turning and cooling as if I were pressing them into snow. Sleep did not arrive as a whole thing. It came in broken pieces, like receiving a long message in parts. I would surface to the thin whine of a scooter below and sink again to the hush of tires on wet pavement. At one point, a neighbor's door clicked shut, and the hallway swallowed the sound. The apartment creaked, the way old buildings do when they settle into the night's temperature. A series of tiny apologies. I was still and then not. Memory, standing at the edge of the bed in the shape of my wife. I do not mean that poetically. In the mind's lit theater, she was always where the light was softest, by the window. Her hair pinned up with 2 silver clips. At the sink, drying a cup with a cloth so thin the cup looked like the moon behind winter clouds. Leaning on the doorframe, trying not to smile while she watched me fail to fix a crooked shelf. When I woke again, it was to absence no noise, no light, only a pressure that made no sound at all. The mattress dipped beside me. If you have ever shared a bed with someone you love for long enough, your body learns them the way it learns walking. There is a weight to a person's presence that is not just weight where they settle. The angle at which the blanket rises, the way the springs negotiate with spine and muscle and breath, that is what my body knew. First, and without permission, the dip had a familiar grammar. It was not a cat, not a draft, not my imagination. It was the exact amount of world that left when she did, returning to the bed like a tide I had not expected to see again. My eyes were closed. I tell you this so you will not think I chased it. Grief is a country of mistakes. I was trying not to make another. My hand was on my chest. Under it, my heart beat in that hard, embarrassed way hearts do when they are caught wanting. I considered turning my face toward the dip. I considered speaking her name. Instead, I counted my breaths the way the nurse had taught me in the hospital when I could not stop shaking. In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 6. The math of staying alive. The bed leveled slowly, like a promise being withdrawn. I opened my eyes to darkness. The time on the digital clock read 2:17 a.m. on Friday, September 13th, 2024. The apartment held its breath. Outside, the river moved in its channel, patient as ever. Somewhere a delivery truck exhaled. The scent in the room had shifted, almost imperceptibly, toward rosemary and pear. I reached for the lamp and did not turn it on. When I finally slept again, it was shallow as a saucer. I dreamed nothing. Morning arrived bright and matter-of-fact, spilling itself across the floorboards. I stood, made the bed, and only then noticed the faint indentation her head would have made had she been there. My rational mind stepped forward with all the arguments it could carry. Springs compress over time. The weight of the blanket pulls toward the middle. Memory makes a handprint of air. I nodded at those arguments as you nod at a well-meaning stranger on the street. I did not look into the bedroom mirror before I left for work, not because I was afraid of what I would see, but because I was afraid I would see nothing at all. On the table by the door, under the small dish where we used to drop our keys, the envelope with the key from her father waited with the patience of metal. The slip of paper bore her grandmother's name in strong, no-nonsense strokes, and an address I did not want to visit yet. I put it back where it was and turned the lock behind me. By evening, I would be brave enough to open it. By the end of the week, I would wish I had never turned that key. For now, I stepped into the corridor with my grief folded like a clean shirt over my arm and told myself that the dip in the mattress was a story I would not tell anyone. I did not keep that promise very long. Grief has a way of teaching you to hear things twice, once with your ears, and once with the wound inside you. The wound always hears more. It began with a smell on the night of Saturday, September 14th, 2024. I unlocked the apartment and stepped inside with the tired shuffle of someone who has rehearsed loneliness. The air was still, a sealed box of quiet. I turned on the light, dropped my bag, and stopped. The room carried a fragrance I hadn't smelled since she died. The faint sweetness of her hair after a shower. Rosemary and pear folded into steam. It came from the bedroom, like a whisper drifting through an open door. I walked in slowly. The window was closed. The air conditioner hadn't been on. Nothing in the room could have made that smell, and yet the pillow closest to the wall breathed it like a secret. I touched the pillow with my fingertips. The fabric was cool, but not untouched, creased in a way that suggested weight had pressed there. My throat worked around her name, but I swallowed it. Saying it aloud felt dangerous, like calling someone from the far side of a cliff and knowing they might answer. The second sign came as sound. Around 1:17 "Ma!" I woke to breathing. Not mine. My own breath was shallow, quick, almost embarrassed. This breathing was steady, measured, the exact rhythm of hers when she fell asleep, curled into the crook of my arm. It came from the right side of the bed, from her side. I lay perfectly still, eyes wide in the dark. Each inhale matched the sound memory had kept for me. The soft hitch at the start, the faint hum in the throat before the sigh. I reached toward the bedside lamp, but stopped. If the light came on and the sound ended, I knew I would break in half. I closed my eyes instead. I counted again. In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 6. When I reached 10, the sound faded. The room held its silence like a grudge. The third sign was touch. On Sunday night, exhaustion drowned me early. Sometime past midnight, I turned in my sleep and felt a hand spread gently over my chest. It was small, cool, and impossibly familiar. Not the ghost hand of dream, but pressure, weight, 5 fingers. I froze. The hand didn't move, didn't press. It only rested there, exactly where she used to place her palm whenever she wanted to feel the drum of my heartbeat. I opened my eyes. The ceiling was a pale blur. The digital clock glowed 12:43 a.m. My pulse galloped under her touch, thudding so loud I thought the neighbors might hear. I whispered her name. The hand vanished. My chest felt naked, as if something had been peeled away. The next morning, I convinced myself of all the usual lies. Fatigue tricks the senses. Grief bends the mind. Memory leaks into waking life. I clung to those excuses the way a man clings to a guardrail in an earthquake, knowing the ground is moving anyway. But the truth was simple. She was back, and she wasn't finished. The apartment mirror was not large, just a rectangle bolted to the wall above the dresser. We bought it together at a home goods store 3 years ago. She had laughed at how crooked I hung it, then corrected it with a twist of her wrist, like everything in life was simply waiting for her gentle touch. After the funeral, I avoided it. A mirror is too honest. It shows what you look like, without the person who used to stand beside you. Still, a man shaves. A man combs his hair. A man cannot live like a ghost forever. That is what I told myself. On Monday night, September 16th, 2024. I forced myself to stand before it. The fluorescent light in the bathroom hummed. My face was thinner than I remembered. My eyes seemed older than they should be. I leaned closer, splashed water, wiped my jaw with a towel. Then I saw it. Her. Not behind me in the room, not beside me in the reflection, but inside the glass. It was brief, half a heartbeat, but the outline of her shoulders appeared just over my right arm. Her hair was loose, darker than shadow, strands clinging to her face as if still wet from the rain that night. Her eyes caught mine through the mirror, wide and red-rimmed, the way they must have looked the last second before the headlights. I spun around. Empty air. The bathroom door opened to the silent hall. When I turned back, the mirror was only me. I laughed then. A sharp, desperate sound, brittle as cracked porcelain. Stress. Hallucination. A trick of light. That's what I told myself while wiping the sink, while switching off the lamp, while climbing into bed. But the next night, the mirror offered me more. It began subtle, a blur in the background, a woman-shaped smudge. Then sharper, the slope of her jaw, the pale of her skin. Her lips parted as if to speak. By Wednesday, she did. Her mouth moved in the reflection, though no sound reached the air. I stared, trembling, slowly. Sound came not from behind me, but from inside the glass, as though the mirror itself was breathing her words out. You promised you would never leave me. The voice was hers, soft and breaking. The same voice that once asked me if I wanted tea, if I could kill a spider, if I loved her, even when she was sick and tired. I reached out. My hand met only cold glass. The surface did not ripple, but it felt softer than it should, almost like skin stretched too thin. Her expression changed. The corners of her lips lifted into something I could not call a smile. Her head tilted, eyes unblinking. "Do you still love me?" she whispered. The weight of the question pressed into me like a hand on my throat. My mouth opened, but no answer came. Not yet. Not no. Only a breath that fogged the mirror. In that fog, letters appeared, not written by me, not from my hand. Her name, and then, beneath it, the faint scratching of new letters forming. Mine. I stumbled back, my hips striking the sink, my pulse racing like a trapped bird. The mirror stilled. My name remained etched there in haze until the fog cleared, leaving nothing but the silence of glass. That night I did not sleep. I left every light on. Still, when I closed my eyes, I saw her face staring out from silver, waiting, patient, like the mirror was not a thing but a door. And I was already halfway through. I told myself I wouldn't look in the mirror again. But grief has its own gravity, and gravity always wins. By the end of the week, I was glancing at it without meaning to, brushing my teeth, setting my tie, passing through the hall. Every reflection felt watched. Even when I saw only myself, I sensed her just outside the frame, waiting for me to blink. The neighbors noticed first. Miss Choi from across the hall caught me one morning and said gently, "You talk at night." I stared at her, confused. "Conversations," she added, "like someone else is there. I thought maybe you'd remarried already." Her words clung to me all day. At night, I realized she wasn't wrong. I had been talking to the air, to the scent of rosemary and pear, to the empty space on my bed. whispers shaped like apologies, confessions, desperate bargains. The apartment was filling with two voices, though only one came from lungs. The food came next. I couldn't bear to cook for one, so I started placing bowls the way I used to. Rice, soup, kimchi, chopsticks laid neatly side by side. Old habit made me speak aloud. Eat before it gets cold. The first night, I laughed at myself when the rice sat untouched. The second night, I left it again. The third morning, I woke to find the bowl empty, not spilled, not spoiled, empty. Even the spoon was clean. I searched the apartment for rats, checked every corner for signs of intrusion. But deep inside I knew she had eaten, or something wearing her memory had. The worst was the balcony. It had rained all Thursday night. When I woke on Friday, September 20th, the floor was dry except for a trail of footprints bare, small, unmistakably, hers leading from the sliding door across the living room to the bedroom. The prints glistened as though freshly made. Though the rain had stopped hours earlier, I followed them with a pounding heart. They stopped at the bed, at her side. The blanket was folded back, as if someone had slipped beneath it while I slept. My chest hollowed. I pressed my palm to the damp print, and the water clung to me like sweat. That night, I couldn't pretend anymore. I sat in the dark, with only the clock's red digits to measure time. I whispered into the air, the way a child whispers into a well to see if it has an echo. Yunji, is it really you? The room answered with silence, heavy and deliberate. Then, faintly, a rustle of sheets. I turned. Her side of the bed was sinking, slow and undeniable, as though invisible weight had just lain down. I could smell her hair. I could hear her breathing. I could feel the cold edge of her body brushing against mine. Too light for flesh, too heavy for a dream. I lay rigid, staring into the dark. The thought came uninvited, cruel and clear. If she can return to bed, she can return to me. And in that moment, I wanted it, even knowing it was wrong. Dangerous, impossible, I wanted it. I closed my eyes, and she whispered back, not from across the room, not from memory, but right beside me, her lips against my ear, her voice soft as soil being shoveled. You kept your promise. When the dead whisper, you listen. But when they start asking for more, you search for answers. By the end of September, I could no longer tell where memory ended and haunting began. I woke each night to her weight on the bed, her cool hand tracing invisible lines on my chest. Some mornings, her side of the blanket was tangled, as if she had tossed in restless sleep. The mirror showed her face more often than my own, and every time, her mouth asked the same question. Do you still love me? I wanted to scream yes, but my throat only made silence. It was her father who gave me the key. I had forgotten it in a dish by the door, but that week, it seemed to hum with importance. One evening, with exhaustion as my courage, I took the subway north to her grandmother's old house. The address led me to a sagging hennock on the outskirts of Ilson, hidden between new high-rises like a relic no one had bothered to erase. The air smelled of pine needles and ash. Windows were shuttered, but the door yielded to the small key like it had been waiting. Inside, dust softened every surface. Wooden beams creaked overhead like tired lungs. I found drawers lined with yellowed newspapers, cabinets filled with jars of dried herbs. But it was the chest beneath the low bed that mattered the one she had once described in passing, laughing. Halmoni keeps paper gods under her mattress. I slid it out. The wood was scarred, corners bound in tarnished brass. Inside lay bundles of talismans. Their ink faded but still sharp enough to sting my eyes. Old cloth dolls with needles through their joints. Coins tied with red string. A photograph of Yunji as a child, folded and refolded until the paper nearly tore, and in the bottom corner, wrapped in silk, a single talisman burned along its edges, as though someone had tried to destroy it. On its face were brush strokes, heavy with intent, characters warning against restless spirits, their power half erased. I touched it, and the air in the house shifted. Cold gathered in my mouth, metallic as blood. The memories came then, half-forgotten conversations sharpened by hindsight. Her grandmother's warning when we announced our wedding: never let her sleep with the window open. Night will borrow what you cannot spare. Her soft laugh afterward, embarrassed, apologizing for the superstition. The way she sometimes woke gasping, saying she saw a shadow bending over me. The faint red paper she kept hidden in her diary, edges sticking out like a bookmark. And, worst of all, the secret she almost told me once. On the night we fought over something stupid, dirty dishes, maybe, or missed calls, she cried harder than the argument deserved and whispered through her tears, "You don't know what follows me." I thought she meant depression, stress, the weight of work. I kissed her hair and told her I would follow too. But now I understood. Something else had been attached to her all along. I took the half-burned talisman home, though every instinct screamed not to. That night, I placed it on the table beside her photograph, and just before dawn, when her voice rose again from the bed, it was different, harsher, layered, like two people speaking at once. You shouldn't have found it. The apartment did not feel like mine anymore. It felt like a stage, and every night the curtain rose. By Sunday, September 22nd, 2024, I had stopped fighting sleep. What was the point? She always came. Whether my eyes were open or closed, she found her way back to the bed. The only difference was how long I could pretend it wasn't happening. That night, I left the talisman on the dresser beside the mirror. I wanted to believe it had power, but sometime past midnight, I woke to the smell of smoke. Not fire ashes, charred paper. The talisman lay in two pieces, its silk wrapping undone, its edges curling inward, as though invisible teeth had chewed through it. The room was cold enough to hurt my teeth when I breathed. Then the bed dipped. I turned my head, slowly, as if moving too fast would shatter my ribs. She was there, not in the mirror, not in scent or sound. Beside me, for one cruel moment, she looked whole, her skin soft, her eyes tired but kind, the way she had appeared the night of our honeymoon. She smiled, and my chest ached with relief so sharp it almost became joy. Then the smile split too wide. The left side of her face began to sag, pale skin peeling like wet paper. Her lips turned black at the corners, teeth showing through in places where flesh had slipped away. One eye clouded white, the other bled red. Her hair hung damp, dripping onto the blanket. Half my wife, half a corpse. She reached for me with arms too cold to be flesh. Her voice carried two tones, now hers, and something deeper, older, like stone, grinding against stone. If you love me, don't ever leave this bed. Her weight pressed down on my chest. My lungs fought for air, my ribs straining under the chill. She lay beside me, then over me, wrapping her arms around my neck in an embrace that felt like drowning. Stay. I could not speak. My mouth opened, but only steam came out. Her breath poured into mine, sour with soil and rainwater, thick with decay. My pulse faltered. My hands trembled, torn between pushing her away and pulling her closer. The mirror across the room quivered, and in its reflection, I saw not us, but a bed filled with shadows. Dozens of them, men and women, pale, broken, whispering the same word in a single voice. Stay, stay, stay. The mattress beneath me grew heavier, as if all of them were climbing onto it. Their whispers became a chant. My vision darkened at the edges. For one desperate second, I thought of her laugh, the real one. Before all this, the way she said my name when she was teasing me, the warmth of her hand when she traced circles on my back as I fell asleep. I forced air into my lungs. My throat tore around the word, no. The room exploded in sound. The mirror cracked from corner to corner. Her body convulsed above me, her face shifting between bride and corpse. She screamed not in pain, but in rage so raw it felt like knives dragged against my bones. The lights shattered. The blanket flew upward as though lifted by a gale. And then silence. I was alone, or so I thought. I sat trembling until the gray of dawn seeped through the blinds. My chest was bruised where her hands had pressed. The cracked mirror across the room still showed her name and mine, etched faintly through the fracture lines. And when I finally dared to look at the bed, the other pillow bore a fresh indentation. Wet with rainwater, I told myself she was gone. I told myself the scream had ended it. But grief is a liar, and so are mirrors. That night, I stayed awake, every light in the apartment blazing, every door locked. I sat in the living room, staring at the cracked mirror across from the bed. Its fracture lines gleamed like veins of lightning trapped in glass. At 2:14 the lights flickered. Once, twice, then died. The mirror glowed faintly in the dark. I rose without meaning to, each step heavy, as if my legs were borrowed. The closer I came, the colder the air grew. My breath fogged in front of me. I reached out. My fingers brushed the glass. It rippled. On the other side, she waited, whole again, smiling, eyes shining the way they had the day we first met in the rain outside Hongdae Station. She lifted her hand, pressing palm to palm against mine through the surface. You promised, she whispered. The floor dropped out from under me. My stomach lurched, my chest compressed, and I was falling not down, but in. I woke to silence. The apartment stood around me, unchanged. But when I turned toward the bed, I froze. I was not in it. I was in the mirror. The room stretched away from me, familiar yet unreachable. On the bed lay my body, eyes open, blank and still. A faint smile curved its lips, but it was not mine. The reflection of my wife slid her hand into his, curling beside him like nothing had ever happened. Their eyes closed together. Their breaths rose and fell in rhythm. I pounded on the glass, but no sound carried. Only my own reflection stared back, trapped, fogging the surface with frantic breath. And then I understood the truth. I had never broken free. The moment I answered her call, the mirror had taken me What lies outside now is not me, but the echo she wanted. So listen carefully. If you find yourself alone, and the night grows heavy, and you see someone you've lost smiling from silver, do not reach back. Do not touch the glass. Do not whisper their name, because I am still here, pressed against the other side, watching. And if you look long enough, you'll see me watching you.